I've had some questions about the NDP's position around what's been going on recently in Rexton around First Nation rights and shale gas. And I just wanted to be clear about a couple of things. First off, on shale gas, the NDP's position is and is going to remain unchanged. We believe that any resource extraction process that New Brunswick enters into has to be based on the answer is yes to the following two tests. The first, is this going to be in the best interest of our province economically? And the second, is this going to be in the environmental and social interests of our province? And today, my answer to both of those questions when it comes to shale gas is clearly no. The science isn't there, and the price of natural gas is too low. On First Nations rights, the New Democrats believe in nation-to-nation talks with the First Nations of New Brunswick. This is part of our broader plan to give power back to communities across our province. We want to see towns and villages given the power to choose their own path forward when it comes to economic development, to running their affairs under strong provincial standards. And when it comes to First Nations, clearly there's a different arrangement. There's interference in many cases, often not positive, from the federal government. But we want to try and strengthen the relationship between the provincial government and the sovereign national territories of our First Nations. So, how do we do that? We have to start by treating each other as nations. And that means talks based on mutual respect and on common ground rules. A nation-to-nation relationship means that the First Nations have responsibilities as well as the New Brunswick government. And I've been very clear that New Brunswick's government has completely dropped the ball when it comes to living up to their responsibilities. There has been no meaningful consultation with First Nations around shale gas. None. The process the New Brunswick government introduced, and part of the blame for this goes to the Liberals who signed the shale gas leases, is that if you get an exploration license to look for shale gas, and that doesn't require really any consultation at all under the law, that automatically turns into a development license, as long as the company spends enough money. Completely unacceptable. There has to be a real structured negotiation process before any resource deal is negotiated with our First Nations partners. So an NDP government would do that, and I'm encouraging this government to do it because they don't seem to have any other sort of plan. And that's been really frustrating, is that over the course of the last week, it's as though the leadership on all sides has gone completely silent. No one's standing up for the moderate, peaceful mainstream in First Nations, in New Brunswick, saying, look, burning police cars, seizing journalists' vehicles, this is not the way to go ahead. And I think it's really worth commending the community meeting in Elsipogtog on Sunday, where there was a public apology for what happened to the CTV and Global News crews. That's the way to go ahead, is to emphasize that the men of violence, these are not the people who are speaking for our communities, whether it's First Nations or the rest of New Brunswick. So we've got to say no to violence, yes to real talks. But as long as there is violence going on, those talks are always going to take place under a cloud, where it'll look like the only reason people are talking is because they're afraid. So we've got to move from talks based on fear to negotiations based on a plan to succeed.